Welcome back to Season 2 of That's So Second Millennium, the Catholic Science podcast, where we look forward to the new synthesis in the new millennium between faith, philosophy, and science. Welcome back to That's So Second Millennium. I'm Paul Giesting, your audio engineer for episode 75. 75, it's a nice number. I've been doing this for a while. I am bringing to you an episode that Bill recorded at Notre Dame with Megan Levis, who was the last of the speakers we hoped to talk to. She was too busy around the time of the conference, but she graciously made time to talk to Bill here in August. And so Megan had a really fascinating talk. You might characterize it as science fiction becoming fact. It was on the topic of brain organoids and the ethics of essentially growing at least the beginnings, in some sense, of a human brain in the laboratory and using it for our own purposes, diagnostic, engineering, whatever purposes we might put those to. There are a lot of purposes we could put a synthetic brain to. So, in this episode, we lead up to that. Bill talks to Megan about her career as a bioengineering graduate student at Notre Dame. We talk about the engineering and ethical principles of design in biological systems. She talks a little bit about her own background and the importance of having a philosophical basis for her faith as far back as high school, something I can really sympathize with, could have used more of in my own life. And then we get to that topic of brain organoids and how we need good philosophy, and the ability to define terms, and the ability to work in a very interdisciplinary sense, where engineers have to use terms that can translate into the language of philosophers and ethicists in order to get a complete picture of what it is that we're trying to do and what its real implications are. It's a great interview. It's the first of two. We will bring you the second part of this interview next week. So, for this week, here are Bill Schmidt and Megan Levis.
We are now all set to go. And welcome, Megan Levis.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we're excited to have you on the podcast. We've had terrific guests with the speakers from the Society of Catholic Scientists conference, and you were one of those, and addressing the topic, I guess it was titled, Created in the Image and Likeness of Man, right?
Yep.
And a very thought-provoking title, especially given the title of the overall conference or the theme, which is, really just the most basic question. What does it mean to be human, right?
It was a great question, and one that I've continued to think about.
Yeah.
Actually added to the screen on my computer, the background right now still has that question from when I was thinking about this talk.
Yeah.
And thinking about what, kind of how I, with my background, can respond to this particular question.
That's great. Have you always, as a graduate, now you're a fifth year graduate student at Notre Dame in biomedical engineering?
In bioengineering.
Bioengineering.
So my undergraduate degree is in biomedical engineering.
Ah, okay.
And the University of Notre Dame, the way that they have it, it's a bioengineering program.
I see. Okay.
Yep.
Is there some interdisciplinary collaboration between the science and engineering schools? Or how do you...
So bioengineering here is mostly in the mechanical engineering department. I happen to be within the chemical engineering department because that's the home department of my advisor. But it's a fairly new program at Notre Dame, and I think they're still kind of figuring out where this program actually lives.
Yeah, I see. So it is new. That's interesting.
Relatively new.
Yeah. With particular emphasis or interest in the ethics of what all this entails? Or is that kind of territory that you're pioneering or relatively...
So are you asking if the department is...
Yeah, I'm wondering to what degree ethics is built into the whole discipline there.
So that has kind of been my own spin that I've brought to the program here at Notre Dame. One of the reasons why I'm here is because I was really interested in these questions relating to both faith and science and engineering.
Right.
And Notre Dame is a great place where I'm I have so many resources here in terms of Catholic community. So that has been something that I have somewhat independently made a point to spend time working and thinking about, integrating faith and science and kind of the ethics side of things. We walked by one of the centers a little bit earlier, so the Reilly Center.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to work with them through a program called Social Responsibilities of Researchers, where we spent a lot of time thinking and working on projects relating to the societal applications and implications of our work.
Wow. So that's true. It's not just a matter of a particular academic department, but one of the things that Notre Dame brings to the party is all of the institutes and centers that one can
I would say like multiple
with.
Communities that you can kind of partake in and be a part of. So I've had the great opportunity to be a part of a couple of different programs. Also this past year I was part of the LASER program, which is a leadership program through the graduate school. And that came out of an ethical leadership program that both the Reilly Center and the graduate school had been running for the past couple of years through the NSF. But they sort of took that program and reworked it through the graduate school. So I've had a number of like opportunities to both learn about leadership and ethics, but also to be part of these programs where it wasn't just about talking about it in the classroom, but it was also about having different practicums and experiences where we were actually putting our money where our mouth was and partaking in different leadership opportunities.
Very good. Yeah. And the leadership consists of not just the ethical context, but what are people looking for in the leadership of these bioengineering fields? Now, obviously, everybody wants to be on the forefront of every bit of knowledge, but sometimes when you're on the forefront, you have a special responsibility to know what you're doing and what the implications are of what you're doing, right? I guess that's a leader's job.
Yeah, so something relating to that, this past year, I was attended this workshop on multicellular living systems that was built through an NSF Technology Center. They were the ones putting this workshop on, where we were raising questions relating to engineering design principles of living systems, but also of ethical principles. So it seems like there is a national interest in making sure that the technology that's coming out more and more quickly, particularly technology relating to systems of living things, that we are doing a good job making sure that we're considering the ethical ramifications and the societal ramifications of the technology that we're developing.
Very interesting, yeah. And obviously the folks who attended the Society of Catholic Scientists conference are genuinely interested in those aspects. I guess it's just a natural ancillary of their Catholic faith. Is that something that arose from your own faith and your own faith journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that I have always found that my faith has been something that has informed my approach to engineering, and particularly approach to the human person. I think my faith has definitely informed the way that I see people as persons. And I think that is something that is greatly kind of enhances my approach to my research as well, in terms of not just thinking about the body as a series of machines, but also kind of like looking deeper at the integration of the parts, and kind of how that is directed towards a particular thing, and how that's directed towards God.
Very good. And is in your own undergraduate and graduate pursuits, have you found that that kind of interest in human dignity and all of the ethical and faith ramifications are not too common or widespread among your classmates and colleagues?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a tricky question. I think it's particularly tricky given that I'm an engineer in an engineering department. Engineers were not known for being incredibly social. So something that I've been really enjoying about Notre Dame is that the longer time I spend here, the more I see professors at Mass, or I see students kind of partaking in the different Catholic groups on campus. So I feel like that's been something that I have seen develop in different ways, surprisingly, among like the different communities of engineers and scientists here, and has been such a great gift being at Notre Dame, where there are multiple Catholic communities. And getting to see engineering professors and other students partaking in those communities has been awesome.
That's great. Yeah. And so Notre Dame gives ample opportunity for wide-ranging discussions and exercises of one's faith. What's your impression of the overall field, not only at Notre Dame, but in general, of whether the interest in and study of the ethical side and the values side of all that's happening in bioengineering is being fully treated and considered?
Yeah, so I've definitely seen it growing, and I don't know if I'm just seeing it growing because I'm sort of going deeper and deeper into the scientific community. But this workshop that I mentioned earlier that was run through the NSF, I think that's a very strong example of how the ethical questions are being raised kind of on this national level. One of the things that came out of this workshop was actually a paper that I worked on with a number of other different participants, which included philosophers, ethicists, scientists, and engineers. So it was a very multidisciplinary group. We recently got this paper that was talking about a community of responsible research. We recently got it published in an engineering journal. So there is definitely that interest there, and I think that it's growing. And it's just been kind of cool to see the different ways in which all of these different fields can interact in so many different ways.
Yes, yeah. That would be kind of nice if the collaboration was bubbling up from the base, largely because of a shared interest in, what's the meaning of what we're doing, and let's consider the implications and ramifications. Is when people are so busy just doing their graduate studies or then doing their teaching and research, that kind of faithful interest in the ethical side can sometimes kind of slip, right? They have to make a special effort to be focused on it. Yeah,
I think that is definitely a thought process that I've seen with a few people, and I think that it's kind of a false dichotomy there, that you have to pit your ability to do great research with being able to interact with different fields and do that kind of interdisciplinary question. Something that I've experienced that's been fantastic is that my advisor has absolutely been supportive of my interest in ethics, and has given me different opportunities to kind of engage in this interest. And I think that the fact that I have been given an opportunity to think about both my research on a small scale and think about the societal implications of it, I think that has made my research better. And I hope, and I have a feeling that it will be an opportunity that more and more students will have, especially in the space that I exist in, where one of the big things in bioengineering these days is the transfer of technology from the benchtop into hospitals and into the clinic. And so that translation of research, you can't really do that without having some type of consideration for how your research fits into society, kind of in general. So I think that maybe part of that is this understanding and this interest in kind of the ethical implications of that as well.
Yeah. Well, I know that one of the things that Notre Dame is interested in through the McGrath Institute is the sealing of that knowledge of the compatibility between science and religion, even at the high school level. And it's good to hear that there's not. You're right. It's not necessarily a dichotomy for any particular reason, but there seems to be growing concern in Catholic circles and pedagogical circles, etc., that the cultural emphasis on scientific thinking is tending to draw away a lot of people from faith and from values-informed thinking, or at least faith-informed thinking. But did you experience that at any point? Pursuing your studies.
Yeah, I don't think that I have really experienced that, but I think that comes from the fact that I had a particular opportunity in high school to be exposed to philosophy and faith together, and to kind of have that deep inquiry for the truth, and that truthful inquiry. I was kind of where I started, and then I moved towards engineering just out of an interest in faith and science, in science and math. And so I think kind of starting with that philosophical base and moving towards engineering, I can see how those things are like very complementary. And I hope that more people kind of see the way in which they work together really well. I think one of the great things about Notre Dame, particularly for their undergrads, is their requirements of students taking philosophy and theology classes. I think there are a lot of the same questions being raised in both spheres, but I agree that there is sometimes this expectation that engineering and your faith and philosophy kind of exist in two different sort of realms, different parts of the brain.
Yeah.
But my experience is always that they have been sort of asking the same questions, and that they also enhance each other.
That's good. Yeah. Now, I don't want to stop inquiring about the conference and about your talk, because I think that's very exciting too. And so you kind of gave the conference a glimpse of something that some lay folks might think of still from the science fiction realm. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was part of my abstract, was saying that these are questions that you would first think come out of science fiction, but actually are things that are coming down the pipeline in terms of bioengineering research.
Yes. And so what would you say is the fundamental question that's being addressed now in ways that those science fiction age thinkers might not realize? Is it that we actually are now facing the responsibility of how we treat organisms of a human characteristic? Is that because that is now a reality with these? You spoke of organoids,
right?
Yeah.
So the question that I was raising was, what do we do with these systems of cells that are built out of human cells that isn't necessarily an organ, but it's something that begins to look like an organ, having the structural components of the organ. So that was kind of at the heart of my talk. I still don't think that there's an answer to it. I think this is one of those fields where, as we kind of conduct the research and as we have more information about how these systems behave, I think that's when we'll be able to better characterize them. So we were talking a little bit earlier about philosophy and science, and I think this is a great integration of the two, because one of the things that we know from philosophy is defining our terms and being able to use language to talk about something and to categorize something. And I think at that point, then you're able to know how you should think about that thing and be able to kind of come to some conclusion of the ethical way in which you can treat it. Something that I've been thinking about a lot with engineering multicellular systems is the fact that we don't necessarily have the language to describe the category of things that we're talking about. So this phrase, multicellular systems, is kind of a clunky phrase, and it describes a number of different things, such as biorobots, which are robots that act kind of like machines that are built out of living tissue. There are these organoids that are systems of cells that begin to look like organs. And there are a number of different examples for this where, because they're such a new technology, I think we maybe don't have the language to describe the category of things, and being able to understand how we should categorize them, I think, will be helpful for being able to consider the ethical implications of doing research on these systems.
But that's interesting that it has to steer clear of merely a clunky, jargony language if it's going to draw in a discussion amongst everybody who really needs to be involved in the discussion. Am I right?
Yeah, and I think part of the problem that I see there is that when we're using these like highly technical terms, which I tried to stay away from in my talk, but when we do that amongst engineers, we know what we're talking about when we're having these conversations or writing papers about them, but it's hard to maybe include philosophers and ethicists at that point if the language that we're using is kind of too much jargon. Yeah,
it's technical language, huh? Very specific to the craft of it rather than the implications of it.
Yeah, and I think part of that part of that problem might be the when we use those highly technical terms, we're sort of specifying every little thing rather than saying, oh, these types of things are of a similar class or of a similar type. And therefore, we can say that it is, falls under these sort of ethical principles or ethical considerations.
Right. Yes. And your talk went into a lot of that and used some wonderfully appropriate non-clunky and fundamental terms like personhood and identity and things like that. So maybe what we'll do is we'll stop with the first part of this taping and return on that topic.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode or one of our previous episodes, please leave us a review on iTunes. iTunes is the biggest distributor of podcasts, and having reviews there will help us reach a wider audience. We would also love it if you posted your review on other services like Google Play and Stitcher as well.